Welcome to the Gravity Well podcast with me, Jenny Araby. I host the Gravity Well to celebrate and share the stories of the people empowering others with knowledge, skills, and plans required to reestablish stability in our communities. Your mission is to work through these heavy issues with me in order to lighten the load. I acknowledge that I live on the traditional territories of Treaty 7 and Métis Districts 5 and 6. The treaties and self-governance agreements established by Indigenous peoples were created to honor the laws of the land, maintain balance with nature, and give back to uphold reciprocal relationships. This knowledge and intention are what guide the Gravity Well conversations. I ask for genuine dialogue, real hearts, and openness to different perspectives. This is your invitation to find common ground with me. Positions taken by participants, either individually or collectively, do not necessarily represent those of the Gravity Well. This podcast is dedicated to the natural world, our children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and all future generations. The Gravity Well is on YouTube, Substack, and streaming wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you see and hear, remember to like and subscribe. Bob Sandford I'm so grateful to have met through a mutual friend, James. So James introduced me to Bob Sandford. I first came in contact to him and Bob for his World Water Day virtual event that he hosted. Both Bob Sandford and Kevin Van Teegen presented for it. I highly recommend you watch and listen to that, especially in light of Bob's new report, which is the Global Water Bankruptcy Report that was released in January by the UN. Bob is the Senior Government Relations Liaison for the Global Climate Emergency Response Team within the United Nations University for Water, Environment, and Health. He joined 4C. So 4C is my Calgarian Citizens on Climate Change group that I meet with on Tuesday mornings. Keep in mind that Bob was offering his update prior to the announcement of the activity in the Middle East. But this is a first glimpse into a new realm that Bob introduces, which is that sustainability has failed us. The climate emergency talk has failed us. We are now aiming to avoid water bankruptcy. So I'm super excited and ready for the mountain of work, but understand that it's up to you. And, please help me convince other listeners in the public to take care about these very important issues. Water is central to everything we do in this province. I really am grateful for Bob's time, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Okay, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you very much. I've heard a lot about this very distinguished group and the high level of discourse that you have, so it's an honor for me to be on this today. I have worked in Alberta extensively on water and climate for a long time, but over time I gravitated to working for the last 20 years with the United Nations, and I am the Senior Government Relations Liaison for Global Climate Emergency Response for the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. We have been working globally on water issues, and most recently launched on January 20th in the General Assembly a major global report on global water bankruptcy, which I will report on. But I've heard some of your names for years, so I'm really privileged to be on this call. Please allow me to begin by extending the very best wishes of the United Nations to all. And in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, I wish to acknowledge from the outset that all peoples contribute to the diversity and richness of civilizations and culture, which constitute the common heritage of humankind. And it is to the common heritage of all humanity, past and present, that I wish to direct my remarks today. So there's little time, and I want to be brief. I'm constantly reminded that the King's speech that started World War II was 9 minutes long, so I don't intend to go much longer than that. So allow me to please get immediately to the point. Watching from the outside, but also being a citizen of Alberta all my life, libertarian direction to which the UCP is committed is most obviously in the bills that it has passed that compromise healthcare, threaten the quality of education, and sacrifice the provinces of environment to extraction industry is what is currently attracting the greatest public attention. And these matters have also made it almost impossible for an overwhelmed and polarized public to recognize and address unresolved crises that predate this government's Trump-inspired strategy of packing the public media space every day with misleading, misinforming, and purposely divisive pronouncements. So these pronouncements distract us away from the government's now obvious agenda of dismantling democracy in Alberta and separating us from Canada. But that may be resolved sooner than later. So while we've been intentionally distracted by a tsunami of manufactured geopolitical tensions, the global water crisis, which has been steadily creeping forward for decades, has continued in its silent advance and has now become a more immediate threat to our future than even the accelerated warming of our climate, to which it is joined at the hip and which Alberta completely denies and ignores. So we can't say that we weren't warned. The major premise of the global water bankruptcy, living beyond our hydrological means, in the post-crisis era report, which, as I said, was released in the UN in January, is that we need to realize that we have reached the stage now with respect to water security globally that we need to name and admit failure so we can enable positive change. And the UN report proposes water bankruptcy as a formal name for this post-crisis state that we've arrived at, and it's defined by persistent over-withdrawal relative to renewable flows and levels of depletion, and the resulting irreversible or prohibitively costly loss of water-related natural capital that is the source of all water wealth. And water bankruptcy occurs when the natural capital that provides the liquid income provided by snow cover and snowpack, melting glaciers, reliable rainfall, wetlands, and groundwater that becomes water in the bank dries up. And the report shows, and this is what's really interesting about it, that even nations like Canada or regions within water-rich countries that consider themselves water sufficient are not immune to water bankruptcy. And it's clear that there are places in Canada that are on the threshold of precisely what water bankruptcy has been described as elsewhere in the world. Even here in Canada, we now find ourselves confronted with a reckoning with respect to water security, hence the creation of organizations like the Canada Water Agency. Nature, our forgiving banker, was patient with us as we ignored her and continually failed to make the promised repayment installments, which in Alberta, for example, were to take the form of forest, watershed, and biodiversity protection, protecting headwaters and groundwater resources, maintaining climate stability, and staying within other known safe boundary Earth system boundaries. And now the moment of truth we know that had to come is approaching. And the Global Water Report, which was released by a Canadian agency, one of the only ones in the UN, puts into relief how close water bankruptcy could occur in places like southern Alberta. And the report points out that the sure signs of pending water bankruptcy are the lock-in of maladaptive infrastructure, when jurisdictions respond to perceived or real crises by creating watershed organizations with responsibility but no authority, building more dams, drilling deeper wells, and ignoring treaties by unilaterally diverting rivers, options that can temporarily mask water insecurity but deepen the insolvency. And though the government refuses to believe it, we're at a point now where our biodiversity-based planetary life support system is no longer able to increase our credit limit without bankruptcy itself. Nature is initiating foreclosure proceedings that will begin with the shutting off of water. As chair of the United Nations International Year of Glaciers Preservation in Canada, we certainly know that the loss of our glaciers and the diminishment of snow and ice globally are just the start. The water is slowly being shut off, and the world is now learning that the biggest strategic mistake in bankruptcy, whether financial or hydrological, is refusing to acknowledge insolvency And if Alberta is to avoid water bankruptcy, it has to admit defeat honestly and early. Alberta must act now to protect remaining water-generating natural capital as a core economic and social asset that must not be sacrificed for marginal or short-term gain. It must be accepted that each additional centimeter of drained wetland, mined or logged headwaters represents a loss of resilience that no engineering skill or project can fully replace. The UN Global Water Bankruptcy Report is a warning, and our climate is going to continue to warm with unthinkable impacts on our mountain snowpacks and glacial headwaters in Alberta. We are not going to be spared in southern Alberta. Imagine Alberta in this way. Look ahead. It has a population of 10 million. Then think the unthinkable. Imagine the bow with half the flow of what it now has, and you get the picture of what water bankruptcy would mean to us and everyone downstream. And you would understand why we need to manage our water far differently than we do now and in the future. And in officially recognizing the necessity and urgency of bankruptcy allocation, Alberta must establish transparent, fair, and principled rules for sharing scarcity and combine them with participatory processes and strong social safety nets that can prevent bankruptcy management from becoming a technocratic justification for dispossession. At present, under the current government, neither the participatory processes that would democratically arrive at just allocations nor the social safety nets such allocations would require exist. So while the future's not written, it's becoming clear. What will force Alberta to manage its precious water resources far more carefully than we do now will not come as an opportunity for innovation and for economic growth, as we're being told. We can no longer sing those songs anymore. Dramatically altering the way we manage water will come as an urgent and immediate necessity. And recent scientific evidence makes it clear that that necessity may be coming at us faster than we think. Early this month, just when things were looking bleak indeed, especially abroad, James Hansen, the climate scientist we all know, published a paper called "Another El Nino Already? What Can We Learn from It?" And the paper has completely shaken up climate projections in the immediate future. In it, Hansen et al. Have observed that the world seems to be headed into another El Nino just 3 years after the last one. And such a quick return, the authors noted, would normally imply, at most, an El Nino of moderate strength. But there was more, much more, because of the extent of warming that has already occurred around the world, and particularly in the world's oceans. An El Nino of even moderate strength may yield record temperatures globally this year and even higher temperatures yet in 2027. Hansen and his colleagues went on to report that their research had demonstrated that the principal drive toward global warming acceleration actually began in 2015, which implies that 2 degrees of warming is likely to be reached in the 2030s, not in mid-century. And remember that Canada is warming at twice the global rate. So even if Hansen is wrong and the anticipated record global temperatures don't show up until 27, the projections he and his colleagues have given us a picture of we might well expect what is coming from 2 years out. And this is where finally we're catching up and perhaps getting ahead of climate change. Evidence supporting Hansen's predictions are already aligning in Alberta. We have already begun to experience conditions similar to what might be expected during the onset of El Nino oscillation in the Pacific Ocean. We have no appreciable snowfall here since Christmas week. Much of the north of the province is so dry that 5 significant wildfires had already been reported in the first week of this month. Record high temperatures have been recorded across southern Alberta. Drought fears are growing. And if Hansen is right, the spring of 2027 could be marked by an even more limited winter snowpack, rising record temperatures, widespread drought, and a wildfire season that lasts all year. So in the event that this occurs, the government's arrogance with respect to water management and the dangers of climate denial could be put into bold relief in 2027, which just happens to be an election year. So by preparing for what the next 2 years might bring and being ready to step in to act on it, the opportunity exists to use the threat of water bankruptcy to rescue, revive, and restore democracy in Alberta, while at the same time ensuring future water security in a rapidly warming world by protecting and expanding the province's natural capital and bringing the economy back down to earth to the ultimate benefit of all Albertans and Canada. This is something that could be done by passionate citizens alone, as I've discussed with Jenny and James and a number of the people who are on this call. And it could be done without the support of any existing political party. Now we arrive at this last week's implications. As Premier Smith's treacherous referendum threatens to divide us against ourselves and the rest of the country, there's probably never been a time in our history when a critically thinking public needs to pay close attention to what our government is putting before us. Now is the time to cut through the cunning and deceptive wording of the referendum questions to ensure the results of the referendum do not further erode our increasingly fragile democracy and sacrifice our place in the country. This is going to take work, but fortunately there are tools available to us to do that work. One of the best tools was developed by the legendary astrophysicist and nuclear winter scientist Carl Sagan, who believed that only through critical ongoing public analysis of the dangerous milieu in which we live could our society endure. Sagan's baloney detector kit is fit for purpose for critically evaluating Premier Smith's referendum questions. And as Sagan points out, by adopting the kit, we can all shield ourselves against guile and deliberate manipulation. In my view, the kit should be circulated and Albertans be invited to determine for themselves if the tools in the kit are helpful in finding our way in the here and now. In closing, in addition to promising new democracy-redeeming legislation to rescind UCP politics on matters as critical as education, healthcare, mining, in the precious Eastern Slopes headwaters, and manifold other matters, which more and more Albertans are increasingly dissatisfied. These politicians and leaders can, under the umbrella of rescuing and reviving and restoring democracy, promise new legislation and a new future for the promise. And in my view, it's now or never. A moment of potentially historical change in Alberta is before us. We must seize this moment, and we can do that by tapping directly into the disparate but growing grievances of a great number of Albertans unsatisfied with the current UCP government, and unifying those who want change under the umbrella of rescuing our weakened democracy. And we can change the course of the history of democracy in Canada by doing so. All we have to do is collectively want to now. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning.
Thank you, Bob. You've covered quite a lot of stuff there.
Thank you so much, Bob. Bob. So Bob brought forward this concept of restoring democracy. It was centered around water. Components from all the work that's happened from this group in that piece. So, I'll mention the water being central. So that's what Colin has been leading. What happened with me with the recall petition and education really helped me understand that education is fundamental to us being able to move people forward into this logic, this water-centered logic. So that's one of the pillars that we're looking at. Healthcare, again, making sure that we're looking at human health as well as ecological health will help people, again, understand the value of this. And then lastly, we added food security. And that came in because we need to be thinking about if we do have a water system that let's be specific, we irrigate a lot in Alberta. And the fact that we are facing severe drought over the next few years, we know that we only have capacity to store up to 2 years. That means our agriculture industry is going to be in trouble. So we need to start thinking about what should a future agriculture industry look like. I know Bob Hawksworth has brought forward some ideas around greenhouses using natural gas, mitigate natural gas emissions and help grow food locally, things like that. So can you help us understand from a UN perspective, from the conversations that you have at that level, Bob, what does this report mean in terms of the language that you'll use going forward? So it's speaking about abandoning topics like sustainability, being accurate about where we are, because we mislead the public, from what I understand in your report, when we understate the problem.
First of all, on matter of sustainability, the whole term of sustainability has been co-opted into uselessness. People now and our interests define sustainability in the terms that they desire. And I was involved in this with Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water, that true sustainability has 17 different elements of it. And to have true sustainability, you have to meet all of those 17 targets in some way or another, especially as they relate to the region in which you live. And so consequently, when people tell me they're doing sustainability, I have trouble holding back, because I get sustainable oil sands, I get all sorts of absolutely ridiculous notions of sustainability. Now, the report itself is really important because it reframes the argument. It no longer says this is an emergency. We've gone past that. We have to see that, and we have to see also the extent to which this is a fact in our lives, and that even in countries like ours, there are places that are highly vulnerable to bankruptcy. Southern Alberta, for one, Okanagan for different reasons than that. The thing that is really important about that is when you admit that you're wrong and that you're not doing what you said, and it's not sustainable, then you face and confront the truth. And that's a reframing in our time of what needs to be done. Now, water is a really important medium. And you talk about water security. Water security equals food security. And it also equals a whole range of other things, including truly sustainable development, sustainable economies, circular economies. And here's the thing, water is something that people agree on. I worked in 40 countries, and a lot of things that are going wrong, and there's often a lot of conflict in these places. But one thing they all agree on, both sides, and in warfare or in conflict, is that water is vital. And now it's become, as we know, a weapon in war. That's how serious it is. But also, on the other hand, water brings people really together. I worked in the Middle East, and the only thing that we could get agreement on was that everybody needs that water. But the other thing, too, is that people who don't disagree on absolutely everything else will come together on that. We have a common ground, water. I think anybody who's been to the Northwest Territories knows the individualism up there. They don't agree on anything. And also large Indigenous populations that you need to have go from the bottom up to change any policy. And the only thing they could agree on was water. And that's why they came up with a water policy for the Northwest Territories, which they were able to translate into absolutely brilliant, groundbreaking transboundary water agreement with Alberta. That's what Alberta's trying to violate with some of these laws and agreements with a co-management on the Mackenzie. So water is something you can work with people. Water is something everybody gets. I think the way we're managing in Alberta is too arrogant. I don't think it's too technically oriented, and it's overconfident. All the things that we see are heading toward reductions in flow, reductions in water availability, unpredictable precipitation patterns, and things that could really damage from the ground up the entire economy and social structure of Alberta.
I have a follow-up, if that's okay. I wanted to ask about, we mentioned with Lauren talking about limits, and I perhaps this is putting you on the spot, Bob, but are you able to, especially from recent experience with what you're seeing in some countries around the world, can you help describe for us? Well, so sorry, let me say two things. We talked about limits because we want to get to a place where we can say no to things. So for example, the oil sands, they're talking about doubling production. Well, when they brag about producing 4 million barrels a day, they're bragging about polluting 4 million barrels a day of fresh water at the same time. So if we double production, that's 8 billion
8 million barrels a day of water, and we could double the capacity of the oil sands tailing ponds in less than 4 years. So to me, it's about restructure, like you're saying, we're moving the conversation around water rather than around energy, which I think is helpful. But then if we can also talk about these potential limits, like so that we can help people understand what they'll see, hopefully, to help inform their appreciation for the urgency, if you will.
It has to do with licensing. Licensing is done on supposition of relatively reliable water supply. Licensing based on a supposition of reliable water supply is growth. And there's all sorts of growth in population and domestic demand, growth in to industrial demand. And in the case of Alberta, if you're going to back off regulations with respect to what happens when you consume your water, which is to say that it's no longer fit for use after it's been used, that starts to limit things also. But the key thing here is we have not understood there's two things that are going on here. There's some really amazing and somewhat sinister forces of history are playing right now than most people comprehend. We're sitting from the sidelines and watching all of this happen. Well, our own security and viability is now becoming front and center. I don't think because the province of Alberta has denied the effects of climate change, and as I've said, the warming in Canada is twice the global rate, the Arctic 3 to 5 times more. We're going to arrive at 3 degrees Celsius before we are prepared in any way for it. And all of us at UN have really looked carefully at this. We don't have any idea what 3 degrees Celsius warming is going to do to our precipitation patterns. We know it's going to change snowpack and snow cover, and glacial melt is already occurring at 4 times the rate it did a decade ago. So we're going to see unpredictable water supplies, deep and persistent drought, unexpected flooding, droughts and floods in the same basin in the same year, which we're already beginning to see, and increasing demand and I think manipulative use of water licenses. I don't think the system is in any way prepared for what we could see happening even by 2030, and certainly by 2035. We're going to be into it. And as often said, this is sort of like being in England in February of 1939. We know something big is coming, and we know it's on the horizon. We're in the middle of a Munich moment here, where everyone knows something big is going to happen. We don't know what it was, we don't know the shape, but we know it's coming. And we shouldn't waste that Munich moment. We should be planning ahead and realizing and overcoming this tremendous threat to science that we have, where science has been sidelined, where it no longer has authority, no longer has a voice, and is no longer at the table where important decisions are being made. In other words, we have to start facing the truth here, or this is going to undo us. And right now, all of this other nonsense regarding separatism, etc., is a complete distraction from the serious issues that, in my mind, are absolutely before us right now. So those are the types of things that concern me as someone with international experience who happens to live in Alberta.
Yeah. I wonder, Bob, I had a great conversation with Dr. Eunice Alila last week.
I've known Eunice for a long time.
Wonderful. What was occurring to me in my conversation with him is when we let our scientific voice fade, it's with the ecology. So us standing up for our own scientific capacity is the difference. Like, so it's us letting go of that power that I think is so vital. Sorry, I see Tom has his hand up. I'll let somebody else ask a question. Thank you.
Because you were talking about how northern Canada is warming at a much greater rate. In your estimation, what will the effect be on the jet stream? Because I think that'll be a real weather catastrophe if that gets derailed or fundamentally altered.
Well, we're already seeing that. What you're seeing is that the jet stream has been slowed And also the troughs that it have go deeper and deeper than we've normally seen. That's why you get winter conditions in Texas or something else. And what happens is with the jet stream, its progression eastward is slowed, which means that you have major fronts stalling in places. So you can have it in a number of ranges. You could have it where you end up with extreme floods, or when it stalls, you could be a cell of extreme dryness and end up in drought, or you can end up in deep cold. Much work is being done on the jet stream, but there's still so much we don't know about the Earth's atmosphere. The interesting thing is we probably learned more in the last 30 years about the Earth's atmosphere than all of humanity has learned before. But there are things going on out there. For example, why is it so difficult now, because of sea surface temperature rises, to really fully understand what Pacific oscillations in El Nino and La Nina will do? And there are things that are surprising us in the ocean that we just didn't know that surface from the depths, certain parameters, certain temperature changes, sea surface rises that are just beyond anything else, that are causing storms of magnitudes that we've never seen before. Then this again deals with the temperature impacts, and this relates also to jet stream behavior, is that you get high temperatures and drying in places that is prolonged enough, and with increased temperatures in the atmosphere, we are getting bigger, hotter, faster fires than we've ever had. Pyrocumulonimbus storms that can deliver 17,000 lightning strikes in a night during a storm. Storms like we saw, firestorms we saw in Jasper, where you get 100-meter walls of fire moving at 125 kilometers an hour. I mean, these are the things that are emerging out of these rising temperatures, and we haven't even seen, well, this is just the beginning, we haven't even seen the beginning of the brunt of it. This is what I'm saying. This is a Munich moment, and we should be acting in it. Does that help?
No, I just was saying, yes, that's great. I think Colin wants to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Great presentation, and it was wonderful to meet you last week. My question is, how do we get your message, or this message of what's at stake, to these wider, there's so many environmental organizations that are working on water or on their own thing, but there's a very lack of coordination there, but also getting labor and healthcare and education all aligned. It seemed like the teacher strike was a moment. How can we get everybody pointing in the same direction, if you have any suggestions there?
Well, I think that there's a couple ways of doing that. I think it's important to have leadership, real leadership, put forward things that will unify all of the dissatisfied interests. That's not easy to do, but democracy and water might be a way of doing that. Now, with respect to environmental groups, I have enormous respect for what they've done, and I've been active environmentally for more than 50 years. But we can't keep using the same approaches. We just can't use the same language and the same arguments in the same way. And that's why I think this water bankruptcy report reframes it. It gives us new energy and a new focus on what could bring us together, that could wake us up, and again, restore the place of science in decision making. So I think there are ways to do that. The other thing that I think too, I have this deepening intuition that we are moving toward big changes. We have to be ready in the moment that those big changes are occurring, to step forward and assume leadership, find the language that we need, put forward visions that we've already carefully articulated, and strategies that we to use to change the course of the argument, the debate. I really feel there's a moment approaching where all of this is going to come to a head, and I think things like Trump's behavior, what's happening in Canada, and the Premier's referendum thing are pushing us toward that moment. On a global scale, I think we're on our way to a world of hurt out there, and that will make this tariff scuffle meaningless. We're engaged on a global scale in an undeclared war that many aren't noticing, but all of humanity and sentient life on Earth is badly losing. And I think that realization is coming fast to us. My hope is that we're moving toward a moment of possibility, a moment of possible change. But we need to be ready for it, and we need to not just prepare for it, we have to make it happen.
Two-part question. First of all, comment. Again, I got to reinforce how human-centric this discussion is, and who speaks for the innocent animals that are going to be caught in the crosshairs and all of this. It breaks my heart. Two-part question, Bob. If you could touch on, please, what the Alberta government is doing wrong with its planned water bill changes with regards to damming and water diversion from the north to the south or from wherever. What about desalination, Bob? Because you're going to hear that from people saying, well, we can just pull from the ocean and desalinate and install and build water pipelines, and that's going to create jobs. So that's my two-part question, Bob.
First of all, we know from experience that simply building more dams and reservoirs is a short-term solution, maybe a century at most. Examples that we are monitoring very carefully right now in the American Southwest. I cut my teeth on the American Hydrologic Society and spent a lot of time there in my early career figuring out what's happening. And I even made a pilgrimage to Bishop's Ranch in Santa Fe and sat in the room when the Colorado River Compact was signed. But you could see right at that time the flaws in it. And the flaw was that you had a reasonably reliable stream flow. And the other flaw was that sooner or later, growth in the area would catch up with whatever amount of water that you would have in it. And now you have an absolute bankruptcy state. And what you did is you relied too heavily on one element of engineering to assure that you could avoid a water crisis and bankruptcy. And so consequently, dams and reservoirs, I'm reminded of this all the time. The line I remember most was from the chairman of the Rosenberg International Forum on Water Policy. He said, all of these engineering strategies really work until you don't have any water. And when you run out of water, then you have to use every imaginable device that you can possibly have to compensate and reduce water consumption per capita. But that doesn't happen if you just simply rely on water diversions and transboundary changes. That is considered to be the absolute evidence of heading the wrong way in terms of climate and also growth and related things. This whole idea of desalination, the whole goal of it was, and I met with GE early when I was in the Middle East about desalination costs. They wanted to get it down to $1 a cubic meter, the cost. They were never able to do that. And also there was a big problem with the salts that you had to pick up and what was done with them because they were an environmental problem in themselves. But if you want to talk about desalination in Alberta and getting water to here, that's economically almost out of reach. And this gets back to this problem. Yeah, you can solve these problems, but it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of oil revenue to raise that money, which creates the problem and exacerbates it. And it's just like Tehran saying, well, we might have to move our capital of 8.6 million people to where there's water, and they're relying on oil revenues to pay for that. You can see the absolute impossibility of a situation like that. I get these all the time. I got one yesterday, and this might be legitimate, that a Nobel laureate has come up with a device that you can use to suck water out of the atmosphere, 1,000 liters a day with this machine he's invented. And I get this all the time. I get this thrown in my face. Well, see, you're wrong. Technology is going to solve all of these problems for us. Bankruptcy is not imminent. We can rely on the technology. We can carry on as we have. How many prototypes of this device are there? 1, 5, 500? One of the biggest things I'm dealing with right now is the deep concern for the collapse of the monsoon in India and South Asia. We fear that tens, maybe even hundreds of millions of people are in serious trouble with water scarcity and food security. How many of these devices would you need? subsistent farmers be able to afford them? I mean, pretty soon we've got to come back down to earth and face the truth and the reality. We're in real trouble. And we have to recognize that. And you may distract us all you want by hidden agendas and other distractions from the media and referenda, but it's coming for us. And we have to wake up and realize that we're not immune to it. We're not going to be away. We're not going to be spared. In fact, we're in the middle of the continent, and as I've said before, if you talk to Danny Blair at the Prairie Climate Center in Winnipeg, they're predicting that business as usual, which we're pursuing vigorously right now, we could effectively, by mid-century, have 9 degrees Celsius warmer temperatures in the food-growing parts of the prairies. And we don't know what that would do. We don't know if warmer temperatures can carry more precipitation, certainly, but we don't know whether or not huge high-pressure cells will be created that will keep the water out until it breaks in it and you have flooding. We're playing a game here that is so risky and so dangerous to the future that it's almost staggeringly unimaginable.
Yeah,
and not that I have opinions on this.
Yeah, you mentioned the word sustainability, Bob, and that's exactly what's been co-opted into business as usual. Thanks very much, Bob.
My context is that we're not addressing the problem directly in the context of CO2 emissions to the atmosphere and what we're doing to our atmosphere. The water problems and the problems on Earth and seem to be related to what we're doing to our climate. How does that relate to us shutting in the hydrocarbon industry in its entirety and looking for alternative sources of energy? And why don't we do that? Why are we not looking more at the fundamental problem of transitioning our global energy?
Well, first of all, let me just go to what the United States has done. I don't want to attack the Americans, but I have to say that there's no other way of saying what's wrong other than in the government's own words. And these words can be found on page 14 of the November 2025 National Security Strategy of the United States of America. We reject the disastrous climate change and net zero ideologies that have so greatly harmed Europe, threatened the United States, and subsidized our adversaries. So, in other words, I think rationality's left the building with that. It's like this. Leaving threats to sovereignty and other nations aside, the acts of the United States with respect to climate policy, we're facing a generational setback in global climate action. And declaring that global climate goals are unachievable and unacceptably strand global fossil fuel assets and claiming that they should be completely abandoned while ignoring the existence of tipping points, which are by definition irreversible. America has set back international climate change, and also by demanding its allies do the same thing has put us at great threat. So what a situation we've got now is the strategy that the U.S. has is overshoot and drawdown. So we'll go to 3 degrees Celsius, and then by then some of these miracle technologies will be perfected, and then we can suck the air out, the carbon dioxide out of the air, and Bob's your uncle. And the problem here is it's like you're in an estuary in the West Coast, and it's a rich estuary upon which you rely for your livelihood. An oil tanker comes, turns on its side, and starts spewing oil. Continuing to burn fossil fuels while trying to propose drawdown is like trying to clean up that oil spill while it's still gushing out of the ship. It makes it virtually impossible to catch up with. And here's the strategy that's being employed by denialists and those who would perpetuate fossil fuel burning, is that this will force us into geoengineering. We're going to reach the point where we're at such desperate odds that the last thing available to us is what we must use. And I've looked very carefully over the years at all of these geoengineering proposals. And our agency has committed itself to telling the truth that others are afraid to tell. This is madness. This is utter madness. We are plunging full speed into a climate disaster that is going to affect every element of the way we live, how we live, and every element of our economy. That's my view.
if we're extinct, the problem goes away?
No, I don't think we'll be extinct. All of our models say that what will happen instead is that there will be rolling societal breakdown. There will be places that are less affected that build up walls to keep the growing number of climate and other conflict-related involuntary human migrants out. There will be pockets of prosperity and perhaps even abundance until temperatures get too high to do that. I don't think extinction is in the cards, but I think a great deal of hurt is.
You know, I've had some interest in water for the last little while, the last half century, and we've worked with our water sanitation system across the country and across the world. We've had many people coming in the door this morning to sign the petition, the Water Not Coal petition. And so we've thrown ourselves into that because it's a life jacket to ourselves personally, just to be able to engage with people. The last person that came in was just leaving from some heart surgery situation, and she was desperate to be able to get her signature on here because she cares so deeply about water. And so that is encouraged me, inspired me, and heartens me in these times that can be pretty dark. So anyway, I just admire and appreciate you so much. Directly sit down with you very often. You're a guiding light for me. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and right back at you. I admire your spirit too, and also the spirit of all of you. One of the real problems that we all face, and certainly we face it, is that any time you bring up the truth, you're a doomsayer, and that's how you're dismissed and disregarded. And the fact is that the truth is on its way. We cannot deny that truth, so we have to stand by it, believe in it, stand up for it, and I know you do. Thank you.
Somebody was saying that for every 1 degree Celsius increase in global average temperatures, the evaporation rate in forests needed an increase of 15% water in order to maintain a forest, to compensate the evaporation rate. Do you have there must be some scientific work that's gone on around evaporation out of our forests that have made them so susceptible to wildfires?
Two ways to look at this. I mean, there's two major factors. For every degree Celsius atmospheric temperature warming, the atmosphere can carry 7% more water vapor because of the melting of glacial ice that is available for transport in a warming atmosphere. What is actually quite true is that we know that in the evaporation rates, the transpiration rates in forests increases dramatically with increased temperatures. The 15% might be accurate for certain forests, but depends on the extent and nature of snow cover and the duration of snowpack. So you can see how all of this is linked and how complicated it becomes. But we know 3 degrees of warming, you get 21% more water vapor in the atmosphere and much higher transpiration and evaporation rates. Transpiration in forests, evaporation on the prairies and in irrigation zones. And keeping up with that, and it won't be consistent. The future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed. This is going to demand very careful evaluation of what's happening where you live. It's absolutely drying. The forests are drying. You look at the forests of northern Alberta right now, they are dry, and also we have zombie fires left over from last summer. And as I said earlier, the wildfire season's already started. And that drying is occurring because of warmer atmospheric temperatures and the grabbing of moisture out of ecosystems.
Could you please say something about data centers and water?
I cannot just say something. I have a lot of views on that. Two things. A data center that's being proposed, I understand, in Olds right now is going to require almost the same amount of energy as the whole city of Edmonton. Exactly. And our biggest fear with AI, and AI people are always telling me, don't worry, Bob, it's going to help solve climate change. Our first thing is the amount of heat that they generate and how much water it takes to deal with that heat. And it's huge volumes of water in a data center like you're going to have. If you have a drought and there's little water and you want to keep the data center going, are you going to deny citizens drinking water or restrictions because of that? And building a data center that is highly water intensive in a place you know where you're going to have water scarcity is a tightrope act.
Hey, Bob, Susan has her question in the chat there. Water slows, cleans, stores, regulates water for us, all for free. Is anyone working to put into the language and concerns of the decision makers, even on a small scale, a cost estimate of us trying to do those things?
Oh, this is such an interesting question. This is an amazing question because what has happened here, especially in the last 2 years, is that, and some of the world's leading neoclassical economists have put this forward. We will be able to afford technology that will be able to replace all of the environmental services that nature provides for free. I think we're beginning to find out two things. There is no such technology. And where such technology exists, it's so expensive that increasingly and cumulatively, we can't afford it. I'm so fortunate to have had James Lee include me in your circle, and I want to thank you all. But I just can't, as I said, I think there's a moment coming, and I can't get it out of mind why this couldn't be the place, and this couldn't be the time that we come together and by caring and sharing and paying common heed to our planet's many warnings, make a change. And I think one day, when it's likely too late to hold anyone alive accountable, we will maintain that everyone has already been against much of what we're doing now. And in the meantime, in terms of climate breakdown, there's no avoiding the penetrating question our warming world is dying to ask. And it's the one question about the climate that will bring us all back down to earth again. And it is a question that future generations will ask us and are already asking us, and upon which our collective prosperity in this warming world will depend. And here's the question. What did you do when you knew? What did you do when you knew? And we know what to do. So I want to thank you for this opportunity.